meeting of the Common Council is called to order. And if the clerk will call the roll.
Mayor Bennett?
Here.
Councilmember Murphy? Councilmember Davies?
Here.
Councilmember Risberger?
Here.
Councilmember Parisha? Here. Councilmember Carson?
Here.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Here.
Councilmember Rafter? Here. Councilmember Humphrey? Here.
And if you join me in allegiance, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'm just going to pass to you. We're going to rearrange the agenda a bit here. So I haven't provided you with any remarks. We'll get to the petitioner section as soon as I'm done here. Okay, sir. All right. So we haven't had any remarks in a while, and I thought, because these are directed at the council, I would sit here where I can see you guys. And I think it's appropriate tonight. So it was our original intention to devote these first few minutes of the meeting to a celebration of Al Lutz' golden anniversary of service. We will have to defer that to our next council meeting, so I expect everybody will be here for that and many more. Nonetheless, even a couple of weeks early, I want to say this about Al. His 50 years are the embodiment of commitment, not just to the job, but to the community and to his extended family of firefighters. He loves this city, and he's spent his life in its service. We're fortunate, we've been lucky even, that Al stepped up and stepped in sometime back in the early 70s, and we've benefited ever since. But there are a lot of folks that haven't had the opportunity to impact the city. Their lives and their jobs, or even their circle of friends, are sometimes disconnected from the day-to-day of city government. But they love Oneonta, and given a chance to help, they relish it. Maybe not for 50 years like Al, but maybe 5 months or 5 weeks or 5 meetings. So I know this to be true. They would love the opportunity to add their voices, their opinion, and their expertise to the implementation and success of shared strategies to set Oneonta on the road to a better future. And we need their help. As I promised when I ran for this office, I intend to give everyone a job that wants one. Everyone gets to row. I said over and over, we're all in this together. And we need everyone in our community to find their role, to find their oar, because we need to turn the ship around. We need new neighbors. Honestly, 1,000 of them would be a really good start. We need to attract a younger demographic, singles, couples, families. We need them to find a safe, vibrant, interesting, entertaining, and welcoming community. They need to be able to find housing and move into neighborhoods and help change them for the better. And we need them. Our service organizations and other volunteer agencies need them. We need succession. And we need the staffing that they can provide our businesses who are so challenged to find help. We need them to help Oneonta into a future that's just as robust as those days of decades ago. Now, 8.5 months into my term, we already have over 100 of your neighbors working on a range of issues, from housing to recruitment and marketing, to the identification of developable properties, to the determination of a plan for deer management, to imagining options for performance stages and planning a splash pad, to implementing a plan to capture the attention of baseball families and parking, addressing parking, and more to come. much more to come. All of these proposals for action will be making their way through our boards, commissions, and committees, and ultimately to council. Council will always be the arbiter and the executor of any action. And you will be busy with that soon, thanks to the efforts of so many in our community who are stepping up to help. Now, I understand that some of this just doesn't find a comfortable home in the language of the charter. And I know that that is frustrating for some of you. But I am asking you to look at this in the grand design and with our immediate needs in mind. Because as a city, we're on the cusp. I don't think that's arguable. So just as I'm asking you of the community, I am soliciting you too, to become partners in paving the way to a successful future, to be creative and open-minded and supportive of the notion that the more opportunities we offer our neighbors to assist us, and the easier we make it for them, the faster we will find ourselves on a better trajectory. I don't expect and would never ask you to be a rubber stamp, not to me. And if you have a better strategy to accomplish our goals, I will always support you. That's what I'm looking for and getting from the community. And that's what I will hope will continue to come from this council. Now, a decade ago, the charter was written as a guide to good governance, and I took an oath to abide by that document. But its writers could not anticipate the moment that we are in. And they could not know the challenges that would be posed to a city administrator or mayor in engaging partners or maximizing productivity or in competing effectively with other municipalities for labor and for population. The charter is meant to be a living document. And what's been made clear in these past weeks is that it needs review. It needs some TLC. There are passages that are vague and contestable. And then there are others, however well-intended, their effect is to compromise our ability to be nimble and to be efficient. So I am appointing a committee to be chaired by Scott Harrington, and including Katie LaParty Shue, and Len Carson, and John Raptor, to review the language of the charter, a charter review committee. I ask that you look for language that may have become counterintuitive or confusing, that you interview the city administrator so that you can benefit from his insight and experience with the mechanics of the charter. And I ask that you determine on a paragraph-by-paragraph basis whether modifications are warranted. And if they are, I ask that you present your recommendations to the legislative committee for their consideration. I understand that changes may be small or they may not be small. They may require a referendum. But in any case, I would appreciate having this process finished by April 1st. We are the mayor and council that are charged in this moment. The city has a need for leadership, open-minded thinking, and creative governance. This is a pivotal time in our history of our city. And we are all in this together. The community, the city, the mayor, and this council. And I know we have the capacity to work together as a team to lead Oneonta in this critical moment and make everyone proud of the work that was done here. I have confidence. That's it. And with that, we're going to move on to petitioners, as we have no presentations or public hearing scheduled. So do we have anyone here to petition to be heard? That would be you. And would you get up and introduce yourself and tell us where you're from?
My name is Edwin Colombo. I'm from 3 Chester Street here in Indiana. The one thing that I am really contracted with, we're really concerned with, is with the code enforcement of having roommates or people that live with me. I live in what they call state-funded housing, the OPWDD, people work for Houston. Okay? And some of us who live in certified housing, like group homes, they're comfortable where they are. Or most of us who live in funded housing, like you just had right now, Your Honor, we're concerned that, we can't have roommates or anybody else. And it is disheartening because we have to be paralyzed or fined for the fact that the college students are due. I just heard one gentleman over here saying that there was one frat house that was parked illegally where you were. Is that correct, sir? Okay. Now, why do we with disability have to penalize, for doing nothing more but just being honest citizens? And I'm not talking about one in the room. I'm talking about us who are funded by the state, who have disabilities. Why do we have to be penalized? Or why do we have to be, let me see if I can say the word. Or why do we have to be, not have a roommate like everybody else? We don't live in college, we don't go to colleges, and some of us do. But most of us have our own homes. And we just want roommates like everybody else. And that's really what we want. We're honest, law-abiding citizens, officer. We are law-abiding citizens. As a matter of fact, most of us are on the state board. And most of us are, like ourselves, advocates. And we are on state, we go on state committees and everything like that. So I do not understand why we have to be penalized, or really forced not to have roommates. We don't go to college, so I think I would like to, for you, Your Honor, to address that, please.
Thank you very much, I appreciate that. All right, if there are any other petitioners? Yes. And you are?
Andrew Hamill.
Andrew.
Hang on there. I watched the public service meeting as well as the housing commission meetings on YouTube, and I found the sound was muffled. I couldn't hear one darn thing what was said. It kind of sounded like the Peanuts cartoon with the wah 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 wah. That's all I heard. That's how muffled the sound and the volume was. I increased the volume, tried changing things on my laptop, my cell phone, even my smart TV, and nothing. The other question that I had is, in the past, and Mayor Brunick, you served on the city council in the past. Correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't CUNY and public students sit on the commissions as like honorary members or something?
I don't have any knowledge of that. Does any council member know this?
I remember Mayor Herzig saying that he wanted to explore that option, but nothing ever happened.
No, we actually appointed somebody and he abandoned me.
Which commission? Planning.
As planning commission.
Oh, for real?
Good information.
I was kind of wondering if the city council would be interested in looking into doing so.
good information, and potentially. Anything else that you'd like to speak about?
At the moment, no.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
All right, we're going to move on now to our boards and commission reports, and we'll start with Scott Harrington and the Board of Public Service.
Thank you, Mayor. The Board of Public Service met on September 1st. I wasn't able to attend, but I did with some help be able to backtrack what was discussed. 13 Pine Street came in for administrative fee, PO for trash removal, which they denied. 32 State Street administrative fee appeal for lawn mowing, which was also denied. 35 Grange Street asked for administrative fee appeal for blighted property. That was approved because the property had been sold and the new owner is going to provide a restoration agreement. I'm assuming that's going to be with codes. Steve, if I say anything wrong, please shout it out. 14 Chester Street had an administrative fee appeal for blighted property. That appeal was denied. 37 River Street was an unsafe building hearing as it was converted into a multi-family home without any permits, structural considerations. I believe it was declared unsafe and vacated until the owner provided architectural drawings. I believe that's going to be two codes that they got to provide that too. 40 Cherry Street was an unsafe building hearing. We're not able to attend. In the meantime, the owner was sent a letter to secure the property. And the Board of Public Service also, Chris Yacobucci was in attendance for a water conservation update, and they granted the DPW the authority to implement voluntary measures through December 31st, 2022, should a need arise at the level of our reservoir hits 74 inches. And I'm sure Greg probably knows more about that than I do, so.
I've been dreaming about it. Not good dreams. So that was a very busy meeting. Anybody have any questions or comments for Scott? Okay, well, very good, thanks, Scott. And then moving on to Councilmember Davies and the Environmental Board.
The Environmental Board met last Tuesday, the 14th. Amongst their discussion was their standing committees gave updates. The elm trees apparently were supposed to arrive last Friday and be planted this weekend, assuming that all went well. We had someone report on the deer task force, or deer management task force, that they're going to be having a meeting at the DEC public forum on September 28th. So I guess it's 8 days from now. Let's see. They also made a recommendation for kind of green purchasing policy. It's really not a policy as much as it's kind of guidelines, I guess. The recommendations there, I've sent those on to the chair of the Quality of Life and Infrastructure Committee and the city administrator just moments ago, and to ask that they be on the meeting for next Monday. I think that's it. If I could just, Mayor, take the opportunity to also mention the Susquehanna Greenway, which kind of I link in there. They met last Thursday, discussed the numerous projects that they've been working on. Obviously, the mill race. They provided updates about New Island and the British study. They are looking at trying to create some sharrows to be able to mark the road from Catella Park over to New Island, and then inquiring about whether we have sharrow stencils. And that was pretty much it. Oh, actually, one last thing, they're going to be offering a Greenway past, present, and future talk at the Elm Park Methodist Church tomorrow at 7 p.m. And so they're going to be providing a little bit of view about where the Greenway has been, where it is, and then our plan is going to be talking about the future of the Greenway.
That's great. Questions for or comments around any of it? Yes, Glenn.
who's leading the presentation on the Elm Park tomorrow?
So as I understand it, is Donna Rover is the person, I think they had said outlined, I was trying to write that down and didn't move away, but I think that's who was offering the future examination, but Donna's be offering the past and present, as she's served on that Greenway Committee for a number of different years. Again, that's 7 o'clock tomorrow, Elm Park, Methodist. 6 o'clock if you want to go to the potluck.
Yes, Scott?
Did you say they planted the trees already, or they're still coming?
They were, this was as of last week, they were supposed to arrive this weekend. I haven't had an update whether they arrived and whether they were planted, but that was the plan. I guess I'm looking to you, Greg, is you?
I don't know. I'm not sure I can follow on that.
Okay. It was the elms that we've been waiting for a while, quite a while.
Good, thank you very much. And moving on now to Councilmember Falco and the report on the Housing Commission, Mrs. Rosenthal.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. We met on Wednesday, September 7th, and started with all the attendees, went around, made introductions. The mayor had some remarks on the aim of this newly formed commission. This was the first time that all of these individuals had met on this commission for the first time. There are a total of 52 people making up the 7 committees, the subcommittees so far. And just to give kind of an overview, you probably already know this, but so each member of this commission will serve as a liaison for each of the 7 work groups / ad hoc committees. I guess we'll call them work groups. While the remainder of each committee is kind of responsible for doing most of the legwork and the heavy lifting, right, for each of these tasks. Then when everyone comes back together, they'll report their findings and we'll kind of go from there. Due to a scheduling conflict, we had to change our general meeting of the Housing Commission to the second Wednesday of every month. And also, as far as these subcommittee meetings go, all members of the council are invited to attend any of those meetings so long as we don't make up a quorum. And chairs of each of these subcommittees will be decided during their first meeting. And then following the meeting, it was brought to our attention that Audrey Beckenstein had resigned from the commission. And that's all the news I have.
So we're looking for her replacement now. Any questions, just Dave?
These subcommittees, what are the names of them, and where do they meet, and when do they meet?
So I do not know that information yet. I think they're kind of still establishing. I do know all the names of the task force. Yes. So and I can give you the names of the representatives on the commission as well. So we have Bob Rosowski with the Senior Housing Task Force, Mike Wilkie with Shared and Vacation Rentals, Jen Armstrong with Infrastructure Task Force, Hannah Baskin for Neighborhood Improvement, Jared Shu for Smart Growth, Deb Marcus, who is not present, for Refugee Housing, and now Affordable Housing, which is a vacant position.
Do they meet at City Hall?
Yes.
Well, not necessarily.
Oh, well, the commission meets at City Hall, but the subcommittees, not necessarily, it could be anywhere.
So are they meeting after 4 o'clock?
They are meeting whenever they
Whenever they can meet throughout the month.
I'm just wondering how members of the general public can attend these meetings to participate or at least witness the meeting.
I don't believe that that's the expectation of an ad hoc committee.
Yeah,
Isn't that how ad hoc committees work? It's got to be a public meeting.
I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head. Committee meetings certainly have to be public meetings.
Right. So I think, I'm sure everybody here would want to know when and where these meetings are, and I'm sure the public would want to know.
Interesting.
I mean, it is interesting.
Yeah.
I asked every other ad hoc committee we've had, do we know where they meet, when they meet?
Our community Solutions panel meets regularly. I don't know where they meet or.
That's a committee set up by the
Police department.
police department.
Is there a difference?
So, well, that's their own group. Isn't that the group that the police chief formed with various members throughout the county? That's his own group. That was not
Right.
done by the council. So those rules are, it's not, as far as I know, that's not us forming the committee. That's the police chief having his own ad hoc group.
When the micro enterprise committee meets, there's no expectation that the community is involved in that.
David, do you want to wait until we?
Yeah, and it does sound like this is part of that discussion item for later on in the agenda.
Sure.
So that said, any other questions or comments for Emily regarding the Housing Commission meeting? Yes, Scott.
Could you just email that to us? I can't write as fast as you're saying, so
Oh, absolutely. I'll just email you guys my notes. No problem.
thank you.
Thank you.
Good. Any other questions or comments for Emily? Thank you. Yes, Lauren.
So out of the commissioners that came, was it a positive response to having work groups assigned to them?
I mean, I didn't get any negative response. I think it's all a very new kind of tactic and idea. And so, I think everyone seemed open to it.
Thank you.
Good. All right, then moving on now to our Parks and Rec Commission report. Councilmember Burchett.
My pleasure. So Parks and Rec met yesterday. I was a little bit late to the meeting, but effectively, Parks Administrator Lansing gave her report, which I will read through to you guys, or summarize. And then there was some discussion on the committee's perspectives on the results of the Willow Park survey and the subsequent sort of draft master plan for Willow Park. So it's fall in the parks. So the softball fields have been converted to soccer fields. Oneonta Youth Soccer is happening at the first week, I think it was 2 weeks ago. There was an interesting thing that happened where a parks user submitted an application and then they needed some additional paperwork or something, and then that was never submitted and they went through with their event anyway. So there was a little bit of a chaos situation, but it was managed and it's all good. And Lou, heartfelt apologize for that, which, it's not her fault, but anywho, so soccer is on Saturdays. This coming weekend is Dog Days in Damascus. On Sunday, there's an Alzheimer's walk in Ewell Park, and then Destination Oneonta is going to have a harvest party on October 2nd. And baseball field 6 is closed, anticipating the renovation. The summer concert series ended recently, was generally well received. I think people really appreciate that we do that. That's sort of it for the report. We talked a bit about the Willow Park priorities. Discussions largely centered on the pool, which needs some maintenance with regard to the large sand filter and the fiberglass grates that surround the pool. So the committee identified those as priorities because they are pretty critical to the pool, which is obviously one of our larger, most utilized facilities. Yeah, that's pretty much it. We did discuss so we received some correspondence again on the basketball court that's on Court 8 in Willow Park, which is the closest to Union Street. The constituent let us know that the plan is for that to be discussed by the Quality of Life Committee in the coming meetings, and so there will continue to be discussion around that. Yeah.
Glenn?
I was asked about men's softball league. Is that something that you can kind of ask Director Langston about?
Sure, I mean, like, does it
He was a
exist?
little, yeah, he said it was going to, but then it got canceled, and he was a little frustrated with that. In fact, he kind of gave me the name of the individual, but
That'd be great.
he said he would be in charge of it, if that's what needs to be done, but
I think that is what needs to be done. Now that you mention it, I think that the person who usually, I feel like I should have a note on this because this is ringing a bell. I think the person who typically organizes that had to back out this year. And I'm fairly certain that that's what happened. But I can look into it for you if you want to share the name of the
yeah,
person.
I'll give you that name.
I'll try to follow up with them. Yeah,
He felt that there was quite a need for it,
sure.
so.
Sure, yeah, it's not something that the Parks and Rec facilitates, it's an outside organization, so,
We don't organize it, the city staff doesn't.
no. So, yeah, I'm not sure why that fell through this year, but I can find out, and I can see if the facilities would be available, if this person is interested in organizing that.
Okay.
Yeah,
And then does Lou keep track of approximate of how many people come to the concerts each week?
I think, yeah, Carrie could probably speak to that.
Yeah, no pun intended.
Sometimes it just happens. There are some where we're looking at 50 to 75. A couple of the last concerts, though, I would easily say we had almost 200. Really good turnout.
So do you think it's based on entertainment selection?
Entertainment and how the weather is.
Lots of potential there. So, yes, I'm sorry.
Well, before, can you just, I want to clarify my email that I sent. It wasn't about soccer, about signage for the fields and that I sent to the.
Oh, yeah, I remember seeing that, I'm sorry. So
I've
this
had
is driving my
a
memory.
few people have come up, since we redone Newell Park, we put in the walkway and stuff, and took out the roads and stuff, they're wondering if some signage could get put up, because you would think field one would be when you first come in, the Ted Christmas field, that's at field 5, I think, or however it goes. A lot of people are like, where the heck is field 6? And so I don't know if we can just get a little bit of signage up that says like, maybe this is this, this over here, even if there's like a little kiosk, I think they're called, maybe right at the Brenner building,
Yeah,
or something like that, where somebody could, or something like that, just,
yeah, I think we responded to you, right?
she did, but I think she thought I was talking about soccer, because she said that she gave maps out for the soccer.
Oh, okay.
So, and it was just a general, because other people were asking to come down there for other events and stuff like that. And like you got the big pavilion, you got a couple little pavilions, and
Okay.
not that it's a real big park to get lost in, but maybe the trail that we just did with since we just invested the money in for the walking trail and stuff like that, if we could maybe get that labeled and.
Okay, more signs of where you are.
Yeah.
Wayfinding signs in the park. Okay, it's a good suggestion, I'll pass it on. I'll make sure that she knows what you're talking about.
I don't think I was real clear by email.
Any other questions or comments for Katie relative to the Parks and Rec Commission? In which case you're still up.
Oh, boy.
Public Arts Commission?
Okay. You'll have to bear with me one second because I'm just writing a note about Scott's feedback so that I don't forget, because I will. Okay, so public art met. Oh, I opened right to it. Enjoy that. Yeah, those are my notes. Okay, great. Public art met on September 14th. They discussed the master plan, which has gone to the Quality of Life Committee. There were requests for some edits and some clarifying information. The chair of the Arts Commission said that that had been resubmitted to the members of the Quality of Life Committee. Is that true?
I haven't seen it yet.
No, okay, so I'm gonna make sure.
It may be
that
working
happens.
its way through, I would assume. I mean, Greg, have you received? No.
No, okay, I'll follow up with
Oh,
them,
check
since
that
I
out.
don't say it right. Okay. I let them know that Percent for Art had been on the agenda of the legislative committee and that is gonna be something that committee is gonna look into. And then I also mentioned that I would follow up with the mayor about the potential funding source that we had identified previously, and where we are with that and moving forward. So, we'll chat. The survey, overall, I'm so happy to talk about this. So the survey overall was very positive. There was only one person out of, I think, 152 respondents who said that they didn't understand public art. Overall, people were really positive. They gave a lot of good suggestions. It's funny because the sort of where would you like to see art could be split into basically downtown and not just downtown. So that was kind of funny. But based on the initial funding for the Arts Commission, I think that a lot of the work is going to be localized downtown, which was the plan of the commission anyway, in terms of like setting up an arts destination and then growing from there. My favorite thing about the survey is that one individual who responded said to the question, what people or places would you like to see, historic people or places in Oneonta would you like to see memorialized through public art? And someone recommended that our 6th Ward Council member Scott Harrington be and I just laughed. I thought it was great. So, you never know, Scott, you may be going up on a building somewhere.
Yeah, that'd be scary.
So that was
Scary.
That was my favorite response of the whole thing. I was caught off guard, but that was good. So we're out there. Okay, we talked about murals on the side of foothills, which is technically a private space. We also talked about them not just being murals, but like wall art, because it could be any number of techniques. So Ian Austin is taking the lead on that. He spoke with the executive director, Jeff Doyle, who's on board, and the board is kind of split about it. He did show them some mock-ups just so that they could like picture, but they're still discussing it. Some are very into it and some are not. The big concern is maintenance. The public safety building, the Arts Commission is totally behind it, but there's no budget yet. We discussed pretty thoroughly the poet laureate, which I'm really excited about. Kathy Spitzoff has been doing the lion's share of that work. Just compiling, what the requirements would be, that she's created the application. So I think that there are only a couple other things that we need to work out before we can roll out that program, which is cool. One thing that needs to be discussed is the honorarium. After our recent discussion, which was great, thank you, through the budget discussion, about like the city historian, it seems like the workload is fairly comparable, so I thought that would be a good starting place to discuss in terms of what the honorarium for the poet laureate could be. Let's see. Oh, the roundhouse painting that's in the walkway currently needs to be removed, so we sort of talked about how, why, where it's gonna go. The discussion basically ended up with, so I guess it's like wallpaper glued, so she painted it, the artist painted it on like a fabric and then like wallpaper glued it to the sheetrock and then screwed in a frame around it. So the recommendation of the Arts Commission was just to chop that section of the wall, clean out, and store it until such time as we figure out where we want it to go. We discussed lightly, so actually I'm glad that we brought up the students on commissions thing, because we discussed lightly Regaining Momentum, which is a program at SUNY Oneonta that involves students in city things. And so the Arts Commission would sort of like to spearhead, having some student involvement, which I think is really cool. The utility box project is basically completely fleshed out, but we have no budget. And we need an email address for the Arts Commission.
We have one now.
Yes! See? Check. That's it.
Questions? So,
All of that.
yeah, I'm sorry.
There we go.
I want to land on one,
Sure.
which is the Jenny Williams painting of the roundhouse
Yes.
in the walkway. We actually had some conversation like what Jenny and I did about what needs to happen. I don't know, Greg, is it a likelihood that removing essentially the wall is an option?
We can take it out and fit it out the door and in somewhere else. I think that the key would be finding a location to store that.
Right.
I don't know, I know Jim was talking about, he might find a place, but I don't know if he has.
Okay.
So there's that. We also talked about how it could be removed, and it's a whole process with steam and so forth.
Hours and hours.
Hours and hours, exactly right. And then the third option that was presented was the idea of memorializing it through some good photography.
Okay.
And then we have it in that fashion as well. But I
Gotcha.
guess it would come down to probably money when all is said and done. But anyway, that's what I know about that
Cool. Thank you.
project. Anybody else have a question? Yes, sir.
So could you just update the rest of the council on the process of the master plan? So Quality of Life is looking at it as a committee as a whole.
Yep.
Have they been making their recommendations? Is that what's happening now?
Yeah, maybe the chair of the Quality of Life Committee could speak to what happened, but my understanding is that the committee made recommendations to the chair of Public Arts Commission, who was going to make the requested changes. And then, I don't know that it was going back to committee, I think it was just coming to council from there. Unless
No, I'm
there's
trying to
another back in
remember.
Quality of
Did
Life.
we talked about it both ways. I think we said, I mean, I didn't have to go back through my notes. I think we said it was going forward to the entire council afterwards.
My notes was that it would go forward to council once
Yeah.
the staff had time to review it.
Oh,
Yeah, so
right.
that's why I sounded
Right.
tonight.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so I'll follow up with the chair, make sure that the edits are made and that it's forwarded on to you so that the staff can go through it. Yeah.
So
Yes.
we're thinking sometime in October, the final document will be handed off to the rest of the council so that we can start.
Also,
Yeah, I mean, I think that's up to, you know, how quickly the staff, you know, is able to prioritize going through it, applicable parties. But yeah, ideally, that would be great.
And is the funding sources part of the master plan, or is just the creative aspect part of the master plan?
It's more just strategy about execution of implementing public art. There are suggested funding sources
Within that document?
included in the document, yeah, but I think they left it general so that, you know, anything could be considered. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody else? No. Okay, well, thank you very much, Katie, to this conference, as usual. Thank you. And moving on to our committee reports, Community Development Committee, I know we met very recently, and our
Yeah, the committee was, what's that?
I don't know how to read it, sorry, everyone.
No, that's just, we all have it. Committee was committee met yesterday, last night, to basically debrief the community wellness summit in August. It was our first meeting since that time. The debriefing kind of focused on some of the big picture ideas, highlight dominated, as you can imagine, the discussion. But we recognize that there are a whole lot of other issues that were out there. It's just the nature of how this is such a big issue. It certainly cuts across a lot of different issues that we're trying to address. The main takeaways, at least for our group, and what we decide working as our next step. I'm sorry, I missed one other point. There was also last night discussion of the warming station. It came up during the community wellness summit that the warming station regarding the building. So it seems like there is going to be some repairs, possibly some repairs on the building to be able to move it forward so that we are able to house people there. At least that's the ideal. And there's several backup plans to get done. So it's good to hear that we are as a community trying to address that particular issue and meet that particular need. So now for the takeaways and the next steps. The committee agreed that several of the things that we felt were kind of within our capacity to begin focusing on. There was a lot of talk from participants that there's a need to have an inventory of the different organizations, what they do, what their mission is, where they overlap, as well as their capacity. In doing so, we might be able to identify some gaps, but we talked about trying to see if we could partner with the county, who's not undergoing a similar study, so we're going to see if we can kind of create something, a database or something that can be able to allow anyone to be able to search it and understand what different organizations are out there and what needs they might need. We also had a lot of conversation about the fact that one of the biggest gaps in this county and in this community are programs to support children's mental health and other challenges. So we're going to begin trying to organize some of those groups that focus on children and mental health and kind of all the other different kind of groups, whether it's activity, play, YMCA, Boys and Girls Club, to begin having some conversations about what we might be able to do to be able to address some of the particular needs that are present there. And then lastly, it was brought up during the summit that there were several church organizations that were represented, and they felt that they had a role to play in terms of addressing and supporting some of the challenges that we have as a community. So we thought that might be an easy next step, is to begin trying to see if we can organize those churches. Maybe they're already organized in some fashion, but be able to see if they might be interested in working with us to identify and address some of the particular problems that are out there. I think that just gives you kind of highlights. Questions?
Comments? Yes. The warning station repairs. Are we looking to contract that out? Are we doing it in-house? It's not what's happening.
That's right. So that is, as I understand it, maybe you can correct me if I am wrong, but I think Catholic Charities is the organizer of the warning station. We're working with the landlord of that particular building to try to come up with a solution to be able to address the roof in a timely fashion.
Do you know what the landlord is? Yes, it's popular.
So the plan is obviously to have it up and running at the winter term school.
I just want to say thank you again for putting all of those community groups together in the same room. I'm still boggled by the fact that they were in the same room at the same time. So I just want to thank your committee for putting them there, and hopefully that'll stop that silo effect, and along with working with our police chief and his group, maybe a little more positive stuff happening for those folks that are in need. So, and thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate it, but I really want to direct also attention to my co-committee members here, Emily and Luke, who three of us worked well together to pull it off. It was a pretty big undertaking. I agree. It was an important meeting to have. There were some very diverse groups, organizations represented. We didn't talk about it last night, but one of the takeaways for me was that we probably need to do this again, as much as it's a challenge, but the organization talked about the benefits. Some of them were they don't want to have more meetings, but I think that there seemed to be some consensus, or at least 50% of the participants are interested in having these conversations. So I think right now we have some immediate things we need to do, and also try to give them some feedback about the entire, give all of our notes to the participants. But I think we'd like to go back and have that conversation about how we would, as a committee, continue to facilitate the conversations that seem to be really important. So yeah, I agree. It was a valuable conversation. And I should also add there was folks from several different counties represented. It was a good group. A lot of heavy hitters in terms of the area that we're concerned about.
Anybody else? Okay, very good, thank you. And we'll move on now to finance and human resources.
There we met September 12th. And we had one item on our agenda, and that was a presentation by Connor Kimball from Enterprise on fleet management presentation. The data that he gave us was based on information that was given to his predecessor. So I guess the final conclusion of our meeting is that Greg and Jenny were going to send an email to him with the updated information, and he was going to come back at some point and give us a new look. I think ultimately the city administrator asked for the evidence of savings and what type of savings it would be if we did look at something like that. Not putting words in your mouth there, but I don't know, I agree with your thought process on that.
Yeah, just generally speaking. How does this make sense for us? And specifically, I think I was asking for a comparison of what sort of resale value they could get for a vehicle that maybe recently sold, so we can see a real life comparison.
And again, I think you've also pointed out, and kind of pointed out, is when do we actually make that happen? Right, so with their system, it was 5 years. I think every 5 years, give or take on the vehicle.
And the vehicle, yeah.
And then ours, I don't know if we've been as disciplined in that approach, so I know that that'll skew the numbers also. So we'll take a look. But overall, I think it was a good presentation, and we'll report back with any findings.
Right, any additional questions or comments for Gwen on finance and HR? If not, then we'll move to John Rafter, Member Rafter for the Legislative Committee report.
Essentially, one thing came up, has been coming up, and it's the Deer Management Task Force. And I will have to beg that question in a way, but what do we mean by deer management? Are deer a problem, or are they an opportunity? We live in an area that is adjacent to wildlife, and whether we want to eliminate the wildlife, manage the population, what do we want to do? But I do think that the notion of establishing a deer management task force to address that issue would be what we've been saying for quite a while. So I think instituting that task force, which I assume would be the Mayor Boylan would be advisable, and then to define what we mean by management and what are we talking about in terms of our relation to our environment and the wildlife in it.
Any questions for John? Okay, thank you very much, John. All right, and with that, we turn to the city administrator and say,
Thanks, Mayor. Employment opportunities, very similar to last time, exactly the same. 2 vacancies in the DPW Streets crew, a vacancy on the Buildings and Grounds crew for a maintenance worker, a Water Street operator vacancy. We're always looking for part-time bus drivers. We're also looking for either a transit working supervisor or a transit coordinator, depending on qualifications. July sales tax report total $455,000 change. That's about $14,000 less than 2021 and about $7,500 more than 2019. Year to date, we are about $47,000 ahead of 2021, which is equates to 1.5%. And year to date, as compared to 2019, we were $420,000 ahead, or 14.5%. We've been, Chief Knapp and I have been looking at the comprehensive emergency plan. Chief Knapp asked former Chief Bob Barnes to take a look at it, since he had been instrumental in writing that most recent version when he was chief. He gave us some good feedback. We're reviewing that. We intend to have our review complete and recommended next steps by mid-October. Obviously, as you will recall from our budget discussions, the council identified emergency management as a top priority in relation to other city services. That's something that we'll be looking at closely in our strategizing as to how we'll address that in the budget. So that's also coming up in October when we'll present the draft budget, so you should see something in there that one way or another we'll be recommending how we can address that going forward. City Clerk Harrington attended the NICON Fall Training School last week. She mentioned that she had some really good trainings, particularly hot topics for marijuana and open meeting laws that were recently updated. I'm sure that training's going to come about as we move forward with dealing with those things. All the lines of the open meeting laws, we hope to have, to present to council for approval at the next meeting, some procedures for a council member video conferencing. Maybe even united on that group of council. Smart Cities technology implementation, Adirondack, our contractor's been installing the police camera system. That's nearly complete. They tell us it should be online within a week or so. It's welcome news for the OPD. Tree trimming removal bid, we opened bids last Friday, not in time to be on this agenda. That'll go through the Finance HR Committee on the 26th, then on to Council on October 4th. Contract will take a couple weeks to execute it, a 60-day contract to complete that work. Given the time frame and our legislative process, it's questionable whether they'll be able to complete all the work this year. It really depends on the weather. Sidewalk replacement, we're seeking quotes for scope of work that is able to be finished this year, we hope. That includes Duane Street, the west side from River to number 21, where it ends now, it'll be replaced, as well as some miscellaneous replacement. Ford Ave, State Street, Cliff Street, East End Ave. You'll note some omissions from that, including the top Bell Street, the Monroe Ave curb, some things that we really hoped to get to this year that it doesn't look like we're going to have time to be able to do. Those will be at the top of the list for next year. There may be some other ones that you're aware of that we talked about. Those are on our list as well. Broad Street stormline replacement. Engineering department did a design to replace or actually extend the line from number 12 Broad Street, which has experienced some recurring localized flooding issues, to tie into an existing storm line that should help that situation. It's not the one and only fix. There's some improvements that can be done on private property that could also help that this will fit in the situation. DPW hopes to install that this fall. And that was all that I had tonight.
Questions? Thank you. Questions for Greg? Comments? Yes, Mark?
Yeah, great, thanks. Last meeting we discussed crosswalk painting, and I understand that was me coming. Is that taking place, or what, is there a date set for it?
No and no. Unfortunately, the contractor that had indicated they're available to do a couple days of painting this fall has since been difficult to pin down on anything. I'm not writing that off just yet, but we don't have any updates at this point.
And just to clarify, because I've been asked by several constituents, we don't have capacity to lay down that special kind of paint that's going to adhere to the concrete longer or the pavement longer, as well as has a particular kind of reflective surface. Is that the case, that we just don't have the equipment to be able to do that?
Yeah, we don't have the equipment in-house, and over time, I guess we can do like a few of them, but we don't have the equipment to go do it at the production level.
Thanks. So are we going to be able to, I'm sorry, follow-up question, are we going to be able to bid that out for spring, summer of next year?
We're going to bid that out this
busy
year
period.
for the next 3 years to try to get a contract. That's what we tried this year. As you know, we responded to try to, that bid included doing all the work this year. So I think if we bid out for the next 3 years, I think hopefully we'll get a response.
Right.
They're in high demand. One of the contractors told us that they're 18 months out for scheduling.
Wow.
Yeah, we've got to get on schedule.
Okay, thanks.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you very much, Greg. And mayor's remarks part 2, I just, because I haven't heard anybody mention anything about it, so I'm going to just jump in and say how very, very, very impressed I was with the City of the Hills Arts Festival this past Saturday. It was as well done as anything I've seen on Main Street in several years, and it continued on into the evening with something that was near and dear to my heart. Was that first night sort of idea of a button or a band that gets you in, wristband that gets you into a number of different venues. It was Parents Weekend, I believe, up at SUNY, and there were just a ton of folks that got a very, very nice sense of the city of Oneonta. So I just want to express, I think, I'm sure on behalf of everybody here, our congratulations to Hope Von Stengel and the rest of the crew in that Hill City, the City of the Hills Arts group. So thank you very much, and looking forward already to next year. So that's my remarks part 2. We'll move on now to the consent agenda, which I see 4 items, and we'll start with number one, motion that the common council approves the minutes of the regular meeting held September 6, 2022. Number two, that the common council approves the minutes of the special meeting held September 13, 2022. Motion number three, approval of warrants. Motion that the common council approves the warrants totaling $1,400,577.26, and that the same be placed on the Director of Finance desk for payment as presented. And lastly, motion number four, that in accordance with Section C-15D of the City of Oneonta Charter, the Common Council authorizes the creation of the ad hoc committee to be known as the Deer Management Task Force. Is there anyone that needs to remove anything? Yes.
Number one, please.
Number one, all right. Any other, yes, number four. Number four. Okay, so that leaves number two and number three. Do I have a motion to approve? Len?
Second?
Seconded by Emily, and as a clerk will call the roll.
Councilmember Davies?
Yes.
Councilmember Risberger?
Yes.
Councilmember LaPartie?
Aye.
Councilmember Carson? Councilmember Harrington?
Yes.
Councilmember Rafter?
Yes.
Councilmember Falco?
Very good. So moving to motion number one, the approval of the minutes from the regular meeting held September 6th. Emily?
Yeah, so there's absolutely nothing wrong with...
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Do I have a motion? Thank you very much. Do I have a motion to approve? Yes, Moss, followed by Len, and several others. Go ahead, Emily. I'm sorry.
Excuse me. So there's nothing wrong with the minutes that I could see, but when I was reading through them earlier, I noticed on the Revolutionary War Patriots commemoration text for that plaque. I feel like in the, let me see, 1, 2, 3, in the fourth line, there's a grammatical error. The word patriots should not be capitalized. And so I don't know if that can be brought to their attention. I mean, typically it wouldn't be capitalized. You guys can look at it too and let me know if you think I'm out of line here, but that was just, I don't know, so something I thought I should bring up.
Is there an alteration we can make?
It's not our plaque, but it's a notification that we can make.
Yeah,
We're notified.
yeah, I'll send an email right now.
Okay.
I don't know if they'll make the change, because like, we don't have control over that, but.
Right, and we did approve it, but,
Notified.
okay.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be notified.
It'll make it look better.
Further discussion?
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? All right, in that case,
Councilmember Davies?
Yes.
Councilmember Risberger?
Yes.
Councilmember LaPartie?
Yes.
Councilmember Carson?
Yes.
Councilmember Harrington?
Yes.
Councilmember Rafter?
Yes.
Councilmember Falco?
okay. Then that brings us to motion number four. Do I have a motion to approve? So
Second.
seconded?
Second.
All right, Katie. All right, and then Dave, you got to go.
Yeah, the question I have is, since this originally came from Quality of Life back in February, I believe, or March, and I know that there's people already doing work on it, and it's I know, and it's also created more questions with some of the work that they've done through email. But the question I have is, who has been appointed to this, and which committee would we expect an update from them? Would it be legislative, would it be Quality of Life, or would it be the entire council?
Right. So I can't right this moment tell you the 12 members, and I can certainly send that to you folks. And I'm fairly certain that I sent along a document that outlined their scope of work and their timeline and their reporting expectations, and they do report to the Quality of Life and Infrastructure Committee.
Okay. All right.
Any other questions or discussions on this topic?
So then, along with Dave, shouldn't this really, instead of being a legislative consent, actually be a quality of life suggestion? Shouldn't have been a quality of life committee to have brought this motion to the agenda? We could always do a friendly amendment, but I'm not either one of those committees. I'm looking at others.
Well, I think it initially came through the legislative committee because it was an ad hoc committee that was already doing work, as we saw from the newspaper, but it had not been formed properly as dictated in the city charter. So I think at this point it could be either way.
I'll do a friendly amendment to change this from a legislative consent agenda to a quality of life committee motion. Since it's going to report back to...
I'd second that, I mean, that's fine.
Okay. So, seconded by Dave, and you want to call the vote on that?
So the motion is just to change the header on the agenda to reflect a separate committee.
That it was, yes, to quality of life and infrastructure.
Councilmember Davies?
Yes.
Councilmember Lisberger?
Yes.
Councilmember LaPartia?
Aye.
Councilmember Carson?
Yes.
Councilmember Harrington?
Yes.
Councilmember Rafter?
Yes.
Councilmember Falco?
Aye.
Terrific. All right, well, that takes us through the consent agenda, and moving on now to our discussion motions. We have number 5, motion that the common council concurs with the mayor's recommendations to appoint the following to city boards and/or commissions. The Zoning and Housing Board of Appeals, James Tomeno, with an expiration date of September 20th, 2025. And for the Oneonta Housing Authority, Les Bromans and Jeff House, both with expiration dates of September 20, 2027. Do I have a motion to approve? Katie, followed by Mark Davies, and discussion.
Just a question for the clerk. Do we have anybody, well, Les Gorman, since it's the Oneonta Housing Authority, I know the answer to, but and Jeff House, so I guess it would only be Mr. Tomeno. How many years has he been on?
He's not yet met his max.
Okay, does he only have one, or is this?
He had at least one partial appointment, this may be his first full,
Okay,
but he's still under.
Okay.
We track.
I'm always checking.
So, good. Any other discussion on this? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Councilmember Davies?
Yes.
Councilmember Lisberger?
Yes.
Councilmember LaPartia?
Aye.
Councilmember Carson?
Aye.
Councilmember Harrington?
Yes.
Councilmember Rafter?
Yes.
Councilmember Falco?
Aye.
Terrific. Brings us to discussion item number 6, a revision of the city code, 300-34, fraternity, sorority, and membership associations houses. Do we have a motion? Len, followed by Katie.
I can't vote on
There's
it.
no, not to vote, to have discussion. And so here we go. Anybody have something to say on the subject?
I mean, I'll just say that I was very interested in this, but, you know, and I read through it, and I was really relieved to see a lot of my concerns were addressed in terms of, and they may have been in the previous document, but it's nice to be, re-solidifying these things with, with regard to exterior maintenance, with regard to parking. I do have mixed feelings about the idea, because I think that we also were the council that passed the distance ordinance with regard to creation of new fraternities and sororities within a certain distance in universities. And I felt good about that when we did it, but then, I'm thinking about them being in the MU1 zone, and, maybe that's more appropriate. So I'm not sure really where I stand on that, so I sort of defer to, our city's experts on that. And so, yeah, I'm just overall pretty satisfied with the document as someone who lives in a student housing saturated neighborhood.
Any other, Scott?
Steve, I just want to get a little bit of feedback, because I want to make sure that when we pass something that helps your office, because I just want to make sure we don't go backwards or
So the concern raised by members of the council and members of the community is that the planning commission is made up of appointed individuals who may or may not actually live in the neighborhoods that are impacted by these fraternities. And the idea is that the council, is being its representative of the community, including the constituents in the wards where the fraternities are located, would be the ones reviewing the permitting process instead of a mayoral appointed board that maybe would have everyone from the 6th ward and the 1st ward, but no one from the wards where the fraternities actually are currently operating. So this kind of is this was a solution for the council to be more involved in the permitting process instead of an appointed planning commission. The meat and potatoes of this is pretty similar to what it was before, with the exception is when we passed the updated zoning code, it was determined that if we had fraternities, we wanted them to be in our more not congested, but dense zones. So they were allowed to operate in maybe one zone. They would still be required to get an operating permit just like this. They would still have to meet all the maintenance requirements, house size requirements. They would still be under the 3 unrelated ordinance. So in theory, you have a 4-unit house that you could have maybe 12 people in, but it couldn't be a single family dwelling occupied by 12 people like our fraternities are right now. The existing fraternities are largely non-conforming, so they would not be able to be established today. So like the fraternity houses on like Elm Street, those have been in operation since like the 60s. We would not allow that use to start again in those zones. So they are largely outside of the, cut some of the zoning requirements for unrelated individuals and location. However, they still operate under this permit because we've kind of grandfathered them in with this operating permit concept, which started with the special use permit in the 80s. So this is kind of just a new iteration of something we've been doing. I included in the packet all of the application paperwork, so you can see kind of the information that we're collecting when we, even now, when we do these planning commission reviews. With the council taking over this review process or being more involved, the council would then have contact information for all of the students involved in the fraternities. So if there are complaints to constituents, by constituents about these houses, the council member would have a direct contact, they could call the president of the fraternity on the phone because we have that information as part of this application packet. So I believe this will make more sense for the constituents in those, affected neighborhoods, impacted neighborhoods. So I think that this might actually be a better way to also just kind of create a connection between the council representative and the Greek organizations that are there. What I will say is this does not affect unrecognized or
Underground.
yeah, I mean, even recognized fraternities on campus can live together, and they do. This doesn't really impact them because they're not operating recognized fraternity houses. So when we get complaints about 8 people living in a house that all happen to be in the same fraternity, there's not a lot we can do because they're not actually operating as a fraternity house. They're operating as 8 people living in a house that all happen to be in the same club. So this is specifically for the fraternity houses that we recognize as operating legally non-conforming fraternities.
Is there anything in this document that prevents the organizations from not complying to showing up on the night of the meeting? I've gone to a few planning commission meetings and I know that they are on those agenda and then they don't show up and it goes on for months. So is there anything in this document that says show up or?
So there's an administrative penalty attached if you fail to get an operating permit. It's like a $300 a day organization were to get on the agenda and not show up, and May 31st hits and they don't have an operating permit, implement the administrative fee process that we currently use for other non-compliant landlords.
I'm ready to vote for this when we have an actual motion in front. I was a little bit skeptical at first until we had our planning commission meeting this year, earlier this year, where we had a few fraternities, I think, trying to recognize the sorority. Either way, organizations that were not ready to be pushed through their SUP, but within 5 minutes that they were all just going to be, without really checking, with the planning commission, they were ready to pass them all. And I'm trying to step that process was, I think this, what Stephen is looking at doing is going to give a little bit more teeth and make the system all the same for all these great organizations. But then also bring them in front of the common council in the end, which I think is the best thing to do. So, but once we have a motion, I'm ready to vote yes on this.
And I'll add the reason that we have not sent out new packets, because we do this annually, is we're waiting. We don't want to send out a packet as one process and then turn around and swap in the middle. So we typically send these packets out as soon as the kids get back, students get back, so that they can begin preparing for this. Typically, we require all the inspections to be done by before Christmas break, so that when they come back for the second semester, they're getting ready to come to the meeting to present either to the council or the planning commission. But we haven't sent this stuff out yet because we don't want to, change new battles in the old race. So.
One last one. So at this point, we'll refresh my memory. What are we waiting for? Are we waiting for the motion to come from you? Is it coming from you to the legislative committee and back to council? Or
I think it's just the process of laying the ordinance on the desks with enough notice. After the fact.
It'll lay on the desk, if this is final format, it'll get laid on the desk within the next day or two. 7 days, be able to vote on it at your next council meeting. We didn't have it back when I was here.
So what date is that for? Is that?
October 4th is the October meeting, so the 18th.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Okay, so I think you guys owe me a motion to approve, and I'll probably use that next week sometime. I said I didn't need one for this. But we'll move now to discussion of number 7, the formation and filling back up, raising subcommittees to standing committees. And just got a thought on the subject.
well, David, I can start, I guess. But I want to back up a little bit before we talk about committees and subcommittees and standing committees. The Deer Management Task Force was one ad hoc group, and I learned that it was formed by reading the paper, that it was formed, and also had already been doing work. I think it's important that, well, Article 3, subsection C15D says citizen advisory boards and other ad hoc groups. The council needs to be providing permission from the advisory board. So we passed the Deer Management Task Force, and my question is, what other ad hoc groups out there exist that we haven't approved? Because it's clear in the city charter that the council has to get permission for these. And I'm not saying that we wouldn't get permission. And I understand that there's a lot of issues that the city is dealing with. But I don't think that our immediate needs and grand designs trump the city charter. I believe that our democracy and our city charter, sometimes are inconvenient, they're slow, but there's rules to have them and doing things the right way. And in a case of passing an ad hoc group, giving permission for it, I mean, we might be waiting a week, that's it. So I don't really see time as being the issue. So that's the first area, and I think we really need to learn. I know the committees for the Housing Commission were listed as ad hoc committees, or ad hoc subcommittees, which, I mean, in my time on the council, we've never had this. Not to say they're not bad. I think there's a reason to have them, but an ad hoc group is supposed to be a temporary group. So if they are an ad hoc group, number one, I would suggest that we approve these ad hoc groups, but there could also be an argument that they're not ad hoc groups, that they're standing subcommittees, because if we're talking senior housing, vacation homes, smart growth, refugee housing, and there's a few other ones, I think those are issues that are going to be around for quite a while, and I think those are issues that are absolutely should be things that the Housing Commission is going to be working on for quite some time. So I guess my first question is, what other citizens advisory boards and ad hoc groups are out there that we haven't given permission for, that we need to have a motion to approve? If there's advisory groups and ad hoc groups out there, I think the council needs to know what they're doing, rather than being surprised later that, hey, there's this group that's been doing this work for the last 2 years and we knew nothing about it.
So I'm surprised, as I know I've sent any number of emails out that have described the various committees, work groups, ad hoc, connect collections. I'm surprised that you haven't seen that, Dave, and I'll have to make certain that, going back through my emails, that you do. I can probably sit here and make some notations and respond back to you in a few minutes.
Which ad hoc groups are you talking about?
I think I've had a bit of discussion with most folks about all, and those might have been in individual meetings as well with folks. But certainly, I'm happy to send you. In fact, I'll go through in a moment as you guys are having this discussion, and reconnect, on paper with those various groups that we currently have functioning and that we anticipate functioning. I'm going to back out of the conversation, but I'm going to let the council more appropriately have this conversation. But I will just, just reconnect you all with the notion of the Survive and Thrive Task Force, which was an ad hoc committee that didn't go through any approval process. In fact, Judy Pangman and myself were put in charge of. And that group formed, I guess 7 individual groups, and those groups in total probably exceeded 120, 130 people. And I guess ultimately there's an award hanging on the office of the mayor from NICOM, the New York Conference of Mayors, saying good job. So there is precedent, obviously, recent precedent for that, and frankly also for the notion that those aren't meetings that are in the public purview and are more an opportunity for people to bandy about suggestions that may be somewhat off the wall in the moment, but are able to advance a discussion that generates something for an actual committee or the council to be able to act on. So I guess with that, I'll back out and let you guys have this conversation.
Well, to respond to what you just said there, I guess my concern is that, you said that some of these ad hoc committees, task force, have been discussed in individual meetings. I feel that those kinds of ad hoc committees, the place to have those discussions, quite frankly, is here within council, that they're brought up, that we discuss them and we approve them. I don't think anybody can have any objection to ad hoc committees or task force working on some of the absolutely crucial issues we have. The problem is that we don't know these things, and it's helpful to know these things so that we can make suggestions on who might be able to sit on these particular commissions, so we can let our constituents know what's going on. So I think the appropriate place to be able to bring these up must be in council. So I just wanted to address that particular point.
And I will just continue on just for a minute, and then again, I'm going to let you guys have the conversation. But yeah, I've certainly no issue with that at all. Informing the council and informing the public is, priority one for me, and so I'm happy to do that. And I was under the impression that most people had either received emails and/or had conversations with me individually and were well up to speed on all of this. I'll have to go through my emails and see if something maybe didn't make it to your box, David. Yeah, absolutely. And to your point, someone's point too, if we have a need and we have a desire of the public to help, it'd be hard for me to imagine why the council would ever say no to something like that. So happily, I'll present those to council so that council has that ability to hear the expectation, the scope of work, the mission and goals, the reporting expectations, and the timelines. Happy to do it. David?
As somebody that was on the Charter Commission, I will say that this section of the charter was not designed as a way for, it certainly gives the ability to say no to these, but that was not the reason for doing it. It was to prevent any current, future mayor down the road from doing something on the side that the council doesn't know about, or end up being completely blindsided by down the road.
That's reasonable, but also the reason that I've tasked 4 people now with reviewing the charter to make certain that we are as clear as we possibly can be about language, so that there isn't any question in anyone's mind. I know our city attorney has weighed in on the other side of that equation in terms of, the reading of that particular clause, the D that we're discussing here. So the fact that there's some, in the eye of the beholder kind of subjectivity to it is something that I feel we will be doing a favor to our those that follow us in these roles by clarifying.
One thing that's very clear in here is the formation of the ad hoc groups has to be approved by the council. The part that's at question is appointing people to those ad hoc groups.
Sure. David Mercer, do you want to weigh in on this?
Well, again, if you want to read it, we can parse it as though we're giving a sermon. I don't know. You're always on loose ground when you ask me to start talking about what the charter provisions mean. If you look at the section, it says that ad hoc, it talks about committees, and in the charter, let me pull it up. Says citizen advisory renewal boards, citizen advisory board and other ad hoc groups. The mayor may create and dissolve citizen advisory boards, commissions, and other ad hoc groups with common council approval. They can create. On the one hand, it says the mayor can create and dissolve them. On the other hand, it says there has to be common council approval. Well,
is that on the same hand?
That in itself is inherently contradictory, because if you've been created and dissolved by the mayor, then why is the common council meant to approve or not approve? So then it says the mayor may appoint residents of the city to such boards and commissions with the approval of the common council. Then the next sentence says the mayor may appoint residents of the city or non-residents to such ad hoc groups that may serve the interests of the city. You don't have to say it twice if the council has to approve them. Why? So it appears that the mayor can unappoint anybody he feels like to ad hoc committees.
The third sentence was referring to residents or non-residents. That was the purpose of that sentence. Second sentence.
You may be telling us what your brain said when you were the committee were putting it together.
Well, that's intent.
Well, I want to know intent.
So,
No, I want to know what it says.
but you also talked about intent.
I didn't talk about intent.
You said all that's important is what was the intent when this was written.
Well, the words still matter. You can't call it cat, black, and white and say what the intent was, maybe gray. You know,
Well, I disagree with you about the first sentence. The mayor may create and dissolve citizens advisory boards, commissions, and other ad hoc groups with common council approval. It's like with anything else. That
can the mayor create and dissolve them?
he can create it and then it comes forward with the council and then for approval.
So he can't create and dissolve them unless he has common council approval.
Correct. Right.
Well, that's sort of like, I'm sorry to interject, but that's sort of like, you know, the mayor signs things on behalf of the council, but we vote on them.
He doesn't have the authority to sign unless it's approved by the council.
Right, that's what I'm saying. This sounds like the same
Sure.
thing.
Okay, and then he can, once it's approved, the sentence says he can add whatever he wants to it, anytime he wants. Right? And then that's the sentence means.
I'm not arguing that part, just the first
Yeah.
part.
So, but the point I'm making is that the language can be cleaned up. That's all.
Yes, that's where I'm at. When I read and reread this section of our charter, it is conflicting. It's conflicting on who has the authority to create, publicize, or what is the word I'm looking for? Populate, thank you, populate the committees or ad hoc committees. And so for me, that's where I was leaning towards well, which way are we? Is it the council making the decision or is it the mayor? That's how I read this. Then again, I'm not smart enough to know Patriot wasn't supposed to be kept, so thank you very much for that.
The confusing part for me is the sentence that says that it's city residents, and then the immediately following sentence is the same but different.
Right.
That for me was like, didn't make any sense.
Well, the second sentence has an extra comment in it.
Which section are you on?
I'm sorry?
Page 9,
There's an extra comment in it.
page 10.
To such boards and commissions, with the approval of common council, it looks like it should have the word ad hoc group or ad hoc committee within that sentence, and it was left out for some reason. And again, I'd say the last sentence, the purpose of that was to discuss residents or non-residents, to allow them to be appointed to these groups. Because we've had non-residents appointed to ad hoc groups for them.
I think the point is, if reasonable people sitting around the table can't agree on what it means, when with 3 sentences of changes, it can be clarified and the charter can be amended, then why don't we move towards getting a consensus, council passing it, change the charter so it reads what it reads, and then we won't have us arguing again. That's all.
Sounds good.
And I would suggest as well, I mean, I've mentioned the precedent of some consequence of the past couple of years. Nothing fell from the sky for the fact that we weren't clearly adhering, as you're reading it, Dave, to the letter of the charter. And I am looking at a committee, a review committee, going through language and cleaning up that language with the approval of council when all is said and done, running through legislative committee. So I have some confidence that we'll have a more clear document. What I would suggest is that maybe I'm not going to go through the creation of this list right now. I'm sure I have it in email. So I'll send that to everybody along with the various expectations of scope of work, timelines, goals, missions, and reporting mechanisms, so that you all have that. If it's likely that this council's going to want to vote on that, we can bring those to a vote next meeting, October 4th. I'm happy to have that, from the council. I don't expect that there's going to be anybody saying, no, don't do that. And as far as the members, I would say that, as you heard me say in my remarks, we're now soliciting the engagement and input of people who, generally speaking, haven't had anything to do with city government, but are really excited about getting involved to some degree, even as it may only be a few meetings and a few discussions. And I not only do I welcome that, I'm soliciting that. So the idea about these committees, these work groups, et cetera, including the Housing Commission work groups, is that they will, first of all, they will be, infinitely in their place. They will eventually get to some resolution of their, of their vision and goal, and be replaced, or something will, evolve to take its place. But the bigger issue is that people are going to drift in and drift out. And that's reasonable to expect, given that they haven't had a commitment to city government that is similar to, what we have around this dais. So, and I welcome it. So I'll take a couple of meetings from folks that are able to give us, some expertise and opinion that move the ball down the field. Ultimately, all of it comes back through committees and commissions, boards, and the council. So again, and that also is a reason, and again, I'm going to go back to the Survive and Thrive and others. We're looking at a Workfront Advisory Council, but I don't believe those are meetings that are, in the public view. I think the report of those meetings at the Housing Commission, specifically relative to those 7 work groups, that's very transparently going to be, documented. But I feel that there's some real value in people having the opportunity to meet at their house. We don't have the resources here to accommodate, multiple meetings or groups that only can meet at a certain time. So the more flexibility we can allow for this process, the more likely we're going to be able to get where we need to get, as quickly as we frankly we need to.
Just, I'll go back there. You have Scott, Katie, John, and myself, and you charge us for April 1st?
April 1st, yes, 6 months, basically. Scott's the chair.
Mayor, if I could, I'm sorry, I don't want to get into back and forth, but I understand your stated need for us to become nimble in appointing people and move forward. I totally do. But I also feel like this is important work that should be kind of, in the light, if you will, that we understand who's been, especially with the Housing Commission, appointed to these particular groups. Now, they might come and go. They very well might do. We might have to, have a rotating every single meeting. We're approving different people. I'd rather see people have a strong commitment to it, because I think you need to be informed in it. But I don't think that this process precludes us from being able to approve people and make sure that that the people are represented there, that there's not just some kind of group that might have a particular different motives, that we're able to kind of vet the people publicly and appoint them to these groups. I think that's important.
I appreciate that. I can't imagine a moment where any council member would say, no, I don't want this person's opinion on something, but I do hear what you're saying. I think more to, I think David's concern about the public meeting piece of this. While I don't subscribe to the notion that those should be public meetings, I think we probably, with the technology at hand, whether somebody's meeting in their home or wherever they're meeting, have those meetings recorded. I don't think that'd be anything that would, and posted to our website.
That's outside of mine.
No, I get that. I get that. Even again, it's outside of your scope of work, but it's potentially something that we could document meetings and provide those in some archived format. It's something that the council feels that strongly about. I don't, but you are the council. I'm just the mayor. Scott?
And forgive me, I can't remember the original group. Luke was the liaison for it. And then
Community Advisory Board?
Yeah.
Yes, the community advisory.
Back when that was started, I know I had constituents down in the 6th Ward asking me who was on. And then as I started going to subcommittees, they're asking who was on the subcommittees. And I mean, I was taking probably a phone call every other day, and I'm sitting there going, I don't know, they went out into their own subgroups and stuff. And I can only speak for the one that I was on, with Luke. So I think there is some concerns. I do think the public is concerned about who's on, who's not, and look, it's, you know.
So, and I just, yeah, I hear you, and I can certainly provide that information. There's no secrets about this. I just wonder about, you know, an exercise for the council that is kind of a moot exercise. I can't imagine. No, I'm happy to, maybe you're not understanding it. I'm happy to provide you with all of these members. I have Excel sheets on every group, and I'm happy to provide that. What I'm saying is in terms of, and again, I agree with the city attorney's reading of this, which is that the mayor doesn't require council approval on all of these ad hoc committee memberships. But in the interest of transparency, I'm certainly happy to provide that so that we don't have a replication of that issue that you just referenced there, Scott.
And that's exactly what I want to say is not moot. I mean, I think we have several examples where council members have had concerns about particular members appointed and have tried to raise those. They want to make sure that there's constituents from particular wards represented. I don't think it's moot. It often is because we see that there's been a well thought out plan of who's been appointed to these, and we say this looks like a good group. But there might be on occasion something where we have to have some discussion about. I think that's healthy. I think that's important. I think it represents that all folks in this community are represented in terms of through us on these, you know, talk about these particular members. So it's not a moot point.
I take your opinion. I don't really agree with it, Mark, but I do take your...
I'm sorry that you don't agree that it's not a moot point when we've had discussions here on the appointment of different people.
Sure. My sense of it is that there's going to be a lot of ebb and flow here. There are going to be a lot of people who are going to join. A lot of people aren't going to know who these people are. They'll just be names. I'm happy. That doesn't make a difference to me. To bring them out and have council see these names, sure. But I can't imagine, you know, an instance where the council's going to say, no, I want to have this person's opinion, you know, within the context of any work group or committee. You know, the watchword for all this is respectful dialogue. And if somebody has a divergent opinion, you know, sometimes it's helpful.
So all that adds to, I think, in light of ambiguity on the appointment of ad hoc groups or all that, bring them forward and let's have a discussion. And if we don't have any discussion, excellent. But I think it's important.
You know, for me, the most important thing, as I referenced in my remarks, is providing the easiest and most inclusive path for the community to be engaged in problem solving, because God knows we need it. We are an understaffed city government, and it's the value of, look at the triangle in, you know, Lettison and Main Street. It's that type of thing that comes from the community that is beyond the ability of the city to do. And those things, they're out there, you know, I mean, they're just out there. So I welcome and am soliciting that support. As the council wants me to do whatever kind of clerical things that you want me to do, you know, I'll do it, you're the council. But it's very important to me that we are as inclusive and make this as democratic as we possibly can, so that we can gain the benefit of the voices of some people who have not previously had an opportunity to be seen with the table.
If I could respond to that real quickly. Sure. I just want to be real clear. I don't think anybody in this council disagrees with what you just said about trying to be inclusive, about trying to do the very important work and trying to get more voices at the table. I don't think there's a person who disagree with that. I think it's important that we keep the process transparent and very public so that we're able to ensure that we have a democratic process in doing this.
I will take the council's word. 3 things. One is
one of the main reasons of things we did in the city charter with boards and commissions was to increase participation in inclusivity. And I think it was very successful over the last 10 years in bringing new people into our boards and commissions. Two, as far as the gardens in the triangle, I thank the volunteers for doing that work, but I think that is absolutely in the purview of this council for solving that. There's no reason why we can't solve that. The reason why it became the way that it was because the council did not pay to have a gardener take care of it like we had in the past. And three, I am still very uncomfortable having these different groups. We don't know who's on them, we don't really know the purpose that behind some of them. Even now, meeting wherever and whenever they do. I mean, are they documenting what they're discussing? Do they have an outline of what do they have an agenda in those meetings? The ad hoc committees I was part of in the past, we had them taped so everybody could listen in the end to know what was discussed. So to just know that we have an ad hoc group that's out there doing something, meeting sometime, somewhere, or in people's basement, I mean, that's not bringing it to light of what they're doing and what work they're getting done. And that worries me immensely.
So the solution to that might be, I know those groups that are meeting, they do have agendas, they are taking minutes, such as, they might, and they do have an order for recording, and an expectation of who they're recording to. And I can have them send the chair of whichever committee or commission might be appropriately connected to them, a copy of what it is that they're doing on a regular basis. That's an easy enough thing to do. And as far as their scope of work, their timelines, their expectations, goals, and reporting structure workflow, I am happy to provide that to every council member. And I thought, frankly, that most of you have seen that, and I'm happy to provide that to everybody.
And that's fine, we did mention task force, but when I'm talking about, I think what the main thing that I'm concerned about is knowing that they're meeting whenever, wherever, in somebody's house, somebody's basement, garage. I think the public deserves a little bit more information about when and where these groups' next meeting is. I don't think we should be done in secret. Because especially if we're talking about increased participation and collaboration.
I would agree that it should not be, there should be nothing about it that's secret, but rather, what is going to be logistically, allowing of their being able to meet. We are probably talking about a dozen different groups, including the work groups for the Housing Commission. We have all of the commissions, boards, and committees, and this county council that takes this room, and now we have, I like to call it the mayor's conference room, next door. And we have the potential before 4 o'clock of using the Brenner building, but it doesn't give us a whole lot of options for folks. And one of the nice things about this is that we have a number of folks that are looking to get together to meet. If this council can determine some mechanism by which we can make that more transparent, I'm all for it. Let me know what it is, and I'll push that forward. Mark?
One last point on this, and then I will be quiet. I think taking it to City Hall, this is the people's hall. Everyone in the city of Lebanon and every visitor is invited and welcome in this particular place. If we're trying to make this more inclusive and more transparent, more democratic, people might not be able to feel the same way about going to someone's home. And there's all kinds of different reasons for that. By hosting these meetings publicly here in City Hall, it is a signal that these are open meetings and everyone's invited. You don't have to have a secret handshake passcode to be able to get to the house over here to be able to attend the meeting. My interest is in trying to make sure that we're doing these things in a very transparent, public way. And I'm not trying to say that this was not to be transparent, but my concern is making sure that it's all very transparent so that we can all support the work that's being done and feel good about it rather than wonder what's taking place. Because frankly, right now, I wonder that, what's going on? And I don't know. And I do read my email, all the different task forces that have been assembled beyond what was just stated recently. So I'm kind of thinking,
I'm a council member, I'm not in the loop. That's problematic.
Having been a council member, I can absolutely empathize. So we have an issue around, excuse me one second, gentlemen, I'll come to you. We do have an issue, frankly, around scheduling. There is only so much time that, is available to this room. There are any number of meetings that happen during the day in this room as well, and across the hall. But I'm open to basement conference room. I'm open to logistical options that may be presented if you have them, if we can determine them. Whatever it may be. Whatever it may be. We're not looking to be no secret handshakes here. We're nothing like that. I don't think of a secret handshake, but no, we want to be transparent and frankly, we want to be as engaging of people's schedules as we possibly can be, so that we can get as much assistance as we can here. And we'll work on some of those options. And if there are other options that are beyond City Hall, that someone is, thinks about, might be able to share with me, I'm happy to incorporate those as well. We want this to work. We're not looking for it to be something, there's no backroom dealing going on here, nothing in the shadows. We want this to work. We just want to give people the opportunity to be able to step forward. Again, we've got over 100 and change people who've already determined that it's already to step up. John, go ahead.
You can step on my time, you took it away. But moving ahead, I'm agreeing with Mark, there's sort of, I can hear an intention to say, let's democratize. And turn many things into, it's almost as if we're trying to have a town meeting. We have a council, we have committees, and generally they meet in public. They're open to the public. They're occurring here, either in this room or in another. And I get concerned about diffusing across a wide, possibly a wide spectrum of people, that we lose an order. And that's what's a concern to me, that it's not that confusing to have a meeting, to discuss something, to have people involved with it. We have a council, we have a set of committees, and people can come to those meetings and be part of it, but the more we create what could be seen as a confusing environment about who's doing what, when, where, and for what reason, it becomes to my threat to the organized government.
Anna, do you have any thoughts?
I do. I don't know, I'm thinking about this. One thing with the Housing Commission that did come up for me is that I did feel like the names of the people on all of these subcommittees was not very transparent, and I feel like that should be made known to the public. As far as them meeting in outside of the public arena, I feel like that's the role of the person that serves on the Housing Commission to come back and report the findings, so then there's a discussion, so it's not completely transparent. It's kind of just like getting people in a room to brainstorm ideas so that someone can represent that idea and come back and bring it, try and move it forward. So I'm not so concerned about that, but I think definitely there needs to be some transparency in names. And I almost feel like it would make more sense if the representative on the Housing Commission was the chair and not just a liaison. I'm not sure what the reasoning is for that, because now you have a chair of a committee, and who is that person, and they're not meeting in a public arena.
The rationale for that was politics. We just wanted to absolutely remove any political considerations within the Housing Committee. So we didn't want anybody with an agenda.
Right. I mean, but there could still be someone with an agenda. I don't know. I don't know, it's kind of hard to get rid of that.
I just want to respond to something that Emily pointed out. With the subcommittees, I don't think it's the same as just getting a bunch of people in the room to brainstorm ideas, because the people in the room were appointed by the mayor to brainstorm and discuss ideas. So just because of that, they're not they're volunteers, but they're appointed volunteers. I really think that in itself means that what they do should be as public as possible. So, there was something else I was going to bring up that I don't remember, but I think that, I know what it was. I think what has always happened in the past with ad hoc committees is, before the pandemic, is when there was a meeting, they talked to the city clerk, got it on the calendar. That way, anybody had a question between the council or anybody else in the city, they would know when and where that group was meeting. And I disagree that we don't have room in City Hall for all these groups, and here's why. The city charter says that any committee has to meet 4 o'clock or later. I don't believe it says anything about boards and commissions. Now, while I don't necessarily agree with them meeting at 8 o'clock in the morning, because then the public can't necessarily go, there's nothing saying they can't. But we have the council chambers, we have the basement conference room. I really think there's plenty of room in City Hall for these various groups to meet at various times. They may just have to look at the calendar, like any of us do, and figure it out. And I absolutely think it's possible.
Any further discussion on this? So, where does this leave us? But in my mind's eye, what this leaves me with is a few action items. Can you tell me if I've missed something here? A list of all current ad hoc committees, task forces, et cetera, their missions, their goals, their timelines, their reporting structure, et cetera, to all council. The membership to all council. And then relative to whomever they may be reporting, a report generated, minutes essentially, so that group is, whether it's committee, commissioner, or board, is clear on the progress that's being made and the items that are being discussed. Relative to the housing commission, that's kind of built in, that's kind of baked in the cake. Mm-hmm. But in terms of these others, of which we have a few, and we will be looking at a few, and that structure, I think, makes some sort of sense. I can certainly live with that. We'll have to see what is, what this building is capable of. I know from being here how busy this building can be. But, I hear the council's expectation, and we'll see what we can do about making that happen. Len?
Just off the top of my head. So if we're going to mandate these groups to meet here, someone's going to be issued a key? Because I'm not going to expect city staff to be here until they're done. So if the groups decide to meet at 7, 8 o'clock at night, because that's what's convenient to that small group, is someone going to be issued a key to the building? Again, the whole premise of having the ad hoc committees was not to create more work for city staff and the council. Well, we've gone to great lengths of security in the last few years, so I just want to make sure that we're not breaking any protocols in that manner.
I wouldn't disagree with you. I still think that transparency piece should be the priority, and then we figure out the rest.
Right. Absolute transparency is at the core of me.
But again, if, according to what's in the charter, they can meet during the day, depending on who's on the group. So that's a possibility, and then, of course, City Hall's open.
Of course,
I know there's other meetings that go on.
And there are, most people's schedules are, just as you kind of inferred, either going to be early in the morning or after work, if you're going to have representation of the numbers that you're expecting to see. I think there may also, technology does give us some opportunities around meetings, certainly Zoom through the pandemic was, ubiquitous. And so, whether the premises are the city of Oneonta's City Hall, or they're someplace else in the city, with some appropriate, lead time, I suppose, for the public to be connected, I wouldn't say let's throw away that option. But I do agree with council. I think the consensus is if we can have these meetings happen here without having to hand out a key, without having to compromise our security, without finding ourselves with, people sitting in the hallway here waiting for a room to open, then that would be, a course to pursue. So again, my action items, and tell me if I've missed something, are as I've laid them out for you, not to repeat them again. And if those satisfy the council, it's not a problem for me.
Does that include I think what we can do immediately is have the groups contact the city clerk or whoever needs to be contacted to get on the city calendar so we know when their next meeting is.
We typically advertise them by press release. We do not appear on the monthly meeting calendar, because we're not a meeting of a public body.
Okay. So it's put into the newspaper?
It's into the newspaper to let them know. We put a reservation in our in-house system to let city staff know that the building or the room is going to be in use.
So I think city readership of the newspaper is less than 25% of the residents.
It's unfortunate, but that's
Yeah.
past practice. That's charter review, housing, all of that type of stuff, all the committees. They were all press releases.
Is it possible to create like a secondary calendar of non-public, rather than an individual press release for each one?
We used to write them in pencil on the calendar.
We could, if we have consistency. The thing I hesitate to get into is we're advertising them as public body meetings, and they are not meetings of a public body.
Sure.
The other thing was we do have a couple of committees that are, by anybody's definition, third rail. The one that the CLIC, asked me to put together, which is the Deer Management Task Force, has generated, as you might expect it would, some very strong opinions from some people who are very, 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 very committed to their position. And you don't want to discourage people from solving an issue, or at least presenting some options to council where they have, shied from that in the past. If we have groups that are willing to meet, we don't want to put them in a position in an insecure building, potentially, that's not safe. It's just a consideration. It certainly doesn't apply to any, anything like the majority of the groups that are going to be engaging, but just something to keep kind of in the back of your mind, too.
I think that's a really decent consideration. The thing that stands out to me in that statement is that, are those folks with those opposing views also represented on the commission or the task force? Because I've gotten that feedback about the Deer Task Force specifically, is that it's sort of people who are identifying and pursuing the one course of action, and they may have more suggestions, but it's sort of their goal is
That's
actually.
more information that's going to help, to David's and Mark's point. Having you have more information about what they're doing would be a help to you in talking to your end constituent that would have that issue.
Yeah.
Because in the particular case of the Deer Management Task Force, as it will be the case, I hate to say it, parking, there will be people who think from the outside that these folks have an agenda, and really what needs to happen is that they are fact collectors, and that they are then, having collected those facts, presenters of information to the public peer-to-peer, as opposed to the city telling somebody what to do. And so with that, we wind up, half of the committee, seriously, is that they're very much 2 months. They don't agree about what needs to get done. They just know that something for the health of the deer as much as anything else needs to be done. And so they're coming along essentially for the ride, all of these folks, with an expectation that when they get to the end, they're probably not going to agree about things, but that's okay, because what they need to do is present proposals, whatever those might be, to the Quality of Life and Infrastructure Committee, who will then potentially, take this up to council level. But their job is to collect facts and to be peer-to-peer educators. But I get your point, and I think it bears out what both David and Mark were saying about having, some shared information relative to, what's being done. That'll happen through the Housing Commission, obviously, but in some of the cases of these other task forces.
And I think who's on the committee too, I know that's something that you
Again, I'll send
are
it to
sharing
you.
with us, but I just to reiterate that I think, if people know who's on the committee, in general, when you volunteer for something, you sort of open yourself up to somebody trapping you in the bread aisle talking about it. And, I think there's less opportunity for speculation if those things are publicly available. And so somebody may get trapped in the bread aisle by somebody going, I really don't think, but, that's certainly better than, to your point, thinking that there's some sort of secret handshake meeting going on and conspiring and, however that manifests. So I'm just reiterating that I think that it's great that you've committed to.
And as I said in my opening remarks, if you guys have a better way to get to someplace, I'm all for it, I'm supportive of it. This is, something that makes the council more comfortable. It still gets me where I need to be, which is, engaging as many of these numbers as I possibly can in our problem solving. It's important. It's also really important that they feel, as some of these may or may not be popular decisions, if they had some input to it, that goes a long way. So I will close out this discussion by saying your points are clearly well taken. I will do as I said in terms of action items. Today is Tuesday. By the end of the week, certainly you'll have everything, and if you don't, reach out to me. David?
I don't know that I'm clear about what we decided as a group about time and location for the ad hoc meeting.
I think what we agreed was that as much as we can make something happen in City Hall, that's going to be the priority. If in those cases where it's not, that at the very least we will make certain that there's advance word about it and that the public, has some awareness of it, even as the readership of the Daily Star might be less than what we might want it to be.
I think what's tricky is what Carrie identified, which is that they're not public bodies, so
Right.
they're not subject to open meetings law.
Right.
And we can request that of them, certainly, but I don't know that, I don't know.
I think that they're appointed by the mayor. They're not subject to open meetings law.
They're not public entities, they're not committees, they're not, well, listen, don't get me started. Committees, there are lots of committees that are not, a committee that's subject to open meeting is a committee that can take an action that is binding.
A standing committee.
Yeah, well, we have standing committees that cannot bind the council. You can't vote something, you can't say, we're not going to vote this out of committee, therefore it can never come to council. Our committees do not, none of our committees have the authority to bar any alderman from coming to the council and making a motion at any time on any subject. You simply do that by the consent of the board of the council members. So, because the committee mechanism is more efficient, but technically the committees are not meetings of publicly elected officials for the purpose of doing business, because you can't do any business. You can talk about it, but we have consistently, since David Brenner set up the committee system, because before David Brenner there was no committee system at all, that they would be treated as public meetings, as public entities with appointed. So the simple answer is that the ad hoc committee is not a meeting, a public body within the meeting of the open meetings law.
Nonetheless, I will ask each of
You can still comply.
Yeah, I'll ask each of these work groups as we, maybe we can't require it, but I'll certainly ask each of these work groups, and the expectation will be that there be a level of transparency that will find some level of comfort for within all of our council members, and that the reporting of those various committees, work groups, et cetera, will be funneled to the appropriate reporting body, because they all do at one point or another, they are all connected to a board, commission, or committee, so that things that they're trying to make happen do have an avenue to get themselves to council. So I'll rush out the expectations of reporting, and I will provide council with everything that I have already mentioned in terms of a list. Yes.
Sort of new topic, but along the lines here. Redistricting commission. Is that ad hoc, Mr. Merzick?
No. No, that's it.
Okay.
That's I'm glad I fulfilled the expectation. At least on this time.
Thank you, I'm glad to.
I'm just going to not the dog in this fight. You guys can agree on whatever you agree on. I give my opinion is what the charter says.
How close to you are to having us form that so you can just...
I would say, I will do my best to see an October 4th deadline on that.
Because I know the county is waiting for us. I know the last time we didn't get the work done, I think it took the end of 2013, so it was like 3 years late. Yeah, but I think they got the work done in less than a year.
So does that mean we're at the end of 22 or 23?
No, the late was an editorial comment on his part. There is no statutory limit as to when it can be
But the later it takes us to do it, the more we're going to hear from the county, put it that way.
Right. The county hasn't been bothering me so much, but I'm hearing it from council, so
Yeah, because
I'll endeavor to put together a list for council approval. It's not, when we're talking about that level of commitment, a little bit different sometimes from the ad hoc committees where they can kind of just breeze in, breeze out, and have a conversation or not. There's a little bit more of a job, and with that becomes a little bit more of an ask. So this is one of the things that I find with this job, is that that's not the easiest task.
Well, that committee is it's work.
It's certainly, yes.
I think ultimately we have to approve what they bring forward to.
So I will do my best. If I'm unsuccessful, it won't be because I didn't try, but I'll do my best to have those names for the council for the 4th, and I will provide myself with the option of the 18th, just in the event that I'm not quite able to get there. There's a lot of things on my docket right now, but I will do my best.
One thing to add, if you're interested in appointing anybody that was on it 10 years ago, just as somebody that might remember the process, I know there's still people in town that were on it.
Okay, I'll share those names with me. All right. I think we've exhausted me and this subject. So with that, I'll ask if there's any additional business or...
So, piggybacking off of that last topic, one of the task forces that I was sort of surprised to hear about was the performance stage task force. I think my big concern, in addition to the transparency piece that we were talking about, is that I was surprised to learn about the performance stage task force. It's not anything that has been discussed in Parks and Rec. I doubt actually that any members of the Parks and Rec Commission know that task force exists. I know that Lou is on it. I know that Lou is on it, but I don't think that any members of the commission know that it exists. I think that there are shades in this, for me, under previous administrations, where things sort of wheels begin turning, and then by the time they're presented to council, it's sort of too late to say maybe this is not the way that we want to go. I know that Scott has asked a couple times for us to look at the budget with regard to performance stage. I have asked to look at that. That conversation to date has not taken place. And then I find out that there's a committee of folks who I'm sure very well meaning, who are, advancing this, what is ultimately the expenditure of city funds that is under the purview of council without the knowledge of council. And that's concerning to me quite a bit. So I would like to talk about, and I asked for the information, so thank you to Greg and Mr. Lee for getting me those figures today, sending them out to the entire council. The actually expended ARPA funds and the anticipated ARPA funds. This conversation that I was hoping to have quickly, I want to keep you guys, is really about the fact that everything that is downline from the two things that have already taken place are estimates, and they were prepared again with thought and well-meaning by city staff. There are expenditures of city funds that council hasn't really, and we've sort of asked to discuss a couple of times. This came up for me because the skate park is something that has been talked about at Parks and Rec quite a bit. And I said, I think that there was like $40,000 or $50,000 earmarked for that, but I'm not sure. So I'll look into it. So I wanted to talk about ARPA because truly, well, two things. In my opinion, the skate park cannot just receive a Band-Aid, and I think that that's what $40,000 will probably get us, considering moving a basketball court, a flat basketball court, is estimated at $60,000. But we can't know that until we have an RFQ, right? Someone to come look at it and say, here's what we think needs to happen, here's what we think it's going to cost you. I remember from our previous meeting that we established, that we sort of okayed an RFQ for the space utilization study, that was sort of a no commitment way to sort of get that project rolling, to figure out what that was going to be cost, because we understood what that funding source, that eventual funding source would be. So I wanted to suggest that the council move forward with requesting information, either Q or P, for the skate park, to really understand what the scope of that project is going to be. I think, the concern that I have is that the performance stage is estimated at $235,000. Everything costs more than we think it's going to. And I think that there's right now a team of people who are working in good faith under the assumption that they're going to get to spend that $235,000 on performance stage.